Live.
Awesome. What's going on, family? Happy Friday. Happy Friday. It's Can I Talk with Roz. I'm so happy to have our guest. And first, before I say guest, I want to say hello to my brother Eric Range. So happy to see you, brother. The week is done and we're going into the weekend. So how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. This was another one of them weeks where Friday just snuck up on me a lot faster than I thought, man. And I have this moment each week where I kind of lose track of the day that it's in, and then when I finally catch up, it gets it's like an eye opener. But that just shows that we're keeping it moving, and we got a lot of fires going on, and so we're just happy to be here, man. It's Friday. I'm super excited about our guest. Yeah, I can't even call her a guest. This family.
She's not just
You know
family.
what I mean?
It's family. Hey, we call it the COVID blur. The COVID blur
Yes.
is when you work through the week and you're like, God dang, like we're like I don't even know which day I'm in, what's going on. So
Yeah.
you guys, we're so happy to have you, and just making sure we let you know when you're tuned in to Can I Talk with Roz. We know you have a lot of places that you could be, things you could be doing. The fact that you tune in, the fact that you share the broadcast, the fact that you see the value that we're bringing, we want to encourage you to keep watching. And also, let us know if you have any subject matters that you want us to discuss, any guests that you would want us to have. Anybody in the cannabis industry, if you want them on here, we'll get them on here and we'll make it happen. Because guess what? We got big things popping, and that gives me the
Yes.
opportunity right now to introduce our guest. This young lady is, when I say big things popping, we are so super proud, and it's like family. And we're gonna walk you guys through a journey about Miss Dasheeda Dawson, founder of the Weedhead company and best-selling author. Dasheeda, welcome, my love. How are you?
Hey!
Hey! And look at how
What
beautiful. Yes, yes, Queen. Yes.
I
Yes.
miss you guys.
We miss you more.
Our regular
Yeah.
calls. What is up?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
miss
I
you more.
mean,
Share, tell everybody, just don't give them the short 100-word bio, because we're going to go deep into all the other stuff that you do. But just for those who don't know who this is, because, we know most everybody out there is listening knows who Dasheeda Dawson is. But just tell them a little bit about yourself, starting with who you are right now and what capacity you're working in, and a little bit about your accolades in the industry.
Sure. Well, first of all, I am M for MM United. What?
Yes.
I should have rocked my shirt today. I'm Dasheeda Dawson. Um, I'm the weed head, and I am a global cannabis advocate and educator and business strategist. And right now, I am the City of Portland, Oregon's cannabis supervisor. So I oversee all of the regulatory aspect, licensing, and compliance, as well as community education and cannabis equity. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, for the City of Portland, which is the largest market in the state of Oregon. So I'm very excited. I used to be the chief strategy officer with Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and I've been rocking with y'all since November 2016. What?
yeah.
I went to an Art 420 event in Orlando during vacation and met both of you the same day. I got to see Roz speak. I actually got to see both of you speak. And I was utterly moved. And of course, I've been part of the crew ever since. I thank y'all for adopting me. And my foot.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I remember that day. I remember it so well. I even remember leading up to it. Like I'm promoting, Art 420 on Instagram, and then out of the blue, Dasheeda hits me up and is like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in Orlando. Can we come through to the event and so on?" And she wanted to get some more information. And so when she showed up, it wasn't just her. Like, y'all gotta
Tell
know
that
something
part.
about the Dawson sisters, man. When they come in, the
They
whole
bad.
crew,
They
they're
come correct.
bad.
Hey, no, wait, E, hold up. E, they came in the line. Fly, Orlando. So if you guys don't know, like, so Orlando, we could be a little country and kind of little, like, just laid back or whatever. We have our flip flops on. Not saying that we don't get fly, but this is the middle of the day, a Saturday, like, brunch
Yeah, it
time or
was a
whatever.
Saturday.
And they came walking in a single file line, just
Yes.
eclectic and cute, and just coming in with great
And then
energy.
sat right up front.
Yes.
Right up front. And I remember Dasheeda had her book out, taking notes. Like I had, when we planned that event at the time, it was all about, here it is. We have this company, Art 420, that we're starting. and we're minority owners. But the first year that we had done the show, we really, we weren't in front of the camera. Nobody really knew who ran Art 420. We weren't like pushing it as, here's a Black-owned company. It was just a company. But we realized that minorities were missing out. And so we decided to use that platform to try to educate people. And I'll tell you, there were a lot of people there that day, but I don't remember anybody else but the whole Dawson clan. They were asking the best questions. They were taking notes. They were fully engaged. And it made me, as the person who organized the event, so proud because, I remember saying that day, like, I don't know who this is going to move or what anybody's going to do from what we're talking about today. But I hope that something that is said today will encourage, somebody to get off their butt and get into this industry and make some moves. And I mean, the rest has just been history since then, and all of that you guys have done since then.
Dasheeda, did you know at the time? I mean, you didn't have your plan, did you, in regards to where you thought you would go? When you walked in that space, what were you walking in thinking of? You want to gain from it, or where were you in that point in your life?
Well, I was already in the cannabis space, and I had thought about starting a Black association or nonprofit. I had gone to a few different conferences. I had already launched the weedhead.com, really more so to blog about it. And I think I had not been to not one event that really had people of color. And certainly when I found out about Minorities for Medical Marijuana and that it was founded by a woman, and then I read up on Roz, as well as the fact that she was a Black woman who was an executive, a corporate to cannabis crossover, similar to me, we also had in common that we'd both lost our mothers. And that to me struck a chord right away. I didn't know initially when I reached out to Art 420 about Eric and Tamika. Like, I didn't know that they were going to be like fam. Like, I just thought, oh, well, I'm going to be on vacation and I'm going to use every opportunity to teach my family about what I've been doing the last 6 to 8 months. Because I had already gone to Vancouver, ICBC, I'd been at CWCBE in LA, and I still know Black folk. And so once you hit me back, just I think our exchange, I was like, I feel like they're Black. Like, that was my thought, but it wasn't, you're right, you weren't branded as such. I went there just excited to hear Roz McCarthy speak and see other folks who were there that were among the people that I had started following in the industry. And so when I got there, I'll be honest, like, we came through, like you said, we're from New York primarily. I had my fur on, like, we were there for vacation, but it was heels, fur, like, it was popping, but like, it was a lot.
It was all y'all. Y'all was just like, hey, listen. And I'll never forget it because I saw y'all. I was like, well, where they going?
We coming to see you. We coming to see you. Yeah. You were so inviting. So, and then to get up there and realize that it was Eric and Tamika, and they were so well spoken, and their story was similar, corporate to cannabis crossover. I just knew that I had found my tribe, and I had brought my tribe with me too. And so it was sort of like, hey, let's connect and figure out what the next steps are. And from that point on, I hit the ground running. I was like, okay, what can I do for FM? How do I help with this? I heard you talk, and I felt like you were talking to me, the things that you were saying. And I didn't get a chance to talk with you too tough because I'm not like, I'm just not that. I felt like, you're a Canada celebrity, so I wasn't going to be like harassing you and you got a lot on you, but it was definitely one of those moments where it was pivotal for me. I'll never forget it, because it was a vacation. We were there, my mom had only been gone maybe 5 months. And so that was our first time as a family together. Wow. And I was like, listen, this is what I've been doing. And I want y'all to come. I'll pay for the tickets. Don't worry about that. And roll through. And everybody.
So y'all was still, being someone who lost their mom, y'all was still grieving and kind of going through your own process yourself and they're looking at you like what you doing with this? And just trying to just figuring things out. And that's a really good segue how you brought your sisters into, they all have established some type of connectivity to the industry. And shout out to the littlest one, Ice, for her award, which she blazed, her own podcast that she shares with you. But just talk about I guess that even that from a maturation as a family, and how it is when you lose a mom. It is deeply profound You never forget your mom. You always, she sits right in your heart. How you can taken that and just really, as a family, you guys have blossomed.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my mom is doing her praise dance. She is with us all the time. And, she was from my lifelong, she was a cannabis user. She called it her medicine. I just wasn't, you know what I mean? I was a basketball player. So I was like, nah, I'm good. And, we grew up in the hood. So it was just like, that's the way to get towards trouble. And so we stayed away from it. But now when I look back, as I saw how she used, I know she would, she would be part of the crew. She would have rode with us to that event.
Right. Yeah. She'd have been right up there in the front.
She would have talked your ear off, like, for real. So, but it has been a journey. I came into the industry myself first, and then Ice, as you talked about, the baby of the crew, she was my first employee. Under our management and strategy consulting firm, MJM Strategy. I was like, come on. Her and David were 1 and 2. And David is my best friend's younger brother. So he's like a brother. And, it was like, listen, we've got to figure out how I'm actually going to be moving in the industry. I'm pretty sure they thought we were going to have a dispensary. And I was like, no, actually, I have other thoughts in mind on how we can support the industry using the skills I've got and also the skills that you've got based on where they came from. But over time, it took us a while to amass enough income or revenue generation to bring in my older siblings, my older sister Imani and Avita, who is younger than me, but we're all a lot older than Ice in terms of experience. But it has been something that we've used to help with the grieving process. It's something we can bond over. How many events we've done, whether it's a National Cannabis Festival, we had that lounge, like out in Women Grow. We just think of and we talk about all the time, Mommy would have been cutting up because we are all literally cut from the same cloth, and that is hers. And for me, she was my only parent. I do not know my father. Never had a conversation with him. And so I do feel, like I stepped up because of her passing to try to figure out how do we survive as a family unit. And I thank God for my Aunt Latifah, my mom's sister, who y'all met as well.
Hey, Aunt Latifah.
And she came on full force to support. So it has been a family journey, but it was also hard too out the gate. They didn't understand everything. And so that's why I thank God for my M for MM family. You guys helped me navigate really challenging situations that only you had to be in the cannabis industry submerged for real to get it.
Sure.
And so that was important. That's why I was like, tribe meet tribe, because until Imani fully transitioned, she wasn't fully understanding exactly some of the challenges. But I'm excited.
Now she's a beast. Shout out to Imani. And now she's a beast in the industry.
And the whole family, you guys aren't just surviving now. I mean, I know this all may have started as a tool to help survive and help get through the pain, but you guys are thriving now, man. I look back at all of you guys, and there are a few, couples in the space. There are a few, longtime friends, but very few like families where they're all in it. They're all, moving in their own right. They all have value to bring to the industry, and they're living that truth. And so, you mentioned earlier that, for you, it wasn't a dispensary that you were looking at. Talk about, what made you kind of go away from dispensaries and look at some of the, ancillary side and how that may have led you to where you are today,
Well, that's a great question, Eric. I entered the market in Arizona, which was one of the larger medical marijuana markets before Florida. So it's all before what we know happened in 2016. Right. And it was really a dog-eat-dog kind of environment. They had limited licenses, and it became very clear that there were lines of monopoly, so to speak, in the market. And you couldn't get in unless you were trying to do like a sub license underneath the larger vertical license. It didn't leave room for growth. Now they've over time evolved, and I think that that's great. But at the time, it was just like, all right, I either have to support what's already there, or I have to build my own space. And so there were two things that came out of my time in Arizona. The first was that I could not move and get a license even if I wanted to. Yes, I could support legalization, and I had I really gained a lot of my clients through being an advocate. So I knew I had to be an advocate in order to help full legalization, but I could not get a license. So what was I going to do to make money in the meantime? And what I was going to do was use the skills that Target, Victoria's Secret had already paid me a six-figure salary to do. And that's what I brought to the table, that crossover of that skill right away. All of these brands were still very much like in sort of the old stereotype. And I didn't understand it. The more that I started to really understand the science and understand what patients really needed and wanted to see, I started to be like, well, why aren't y'all looking at the mainstream, way of communicating, messaging, marketing, even doing supply chain development? Why aren't y'all doing that? You're losing a lot of money because you're not in. And that's how I initially got into the industry. But I said the second thing was also the need for education or re-education. Everybody had a different perspective or a different take, and it was largely baked in stereotypes. Very hippie, especially in Arizona or in Nevada, where I started working as well in the 2016 campaign. It was very hip hop there. And not that, listen, I love the culture. I'm from Brooklyn. Like, I call myself the Weedhead, but I'm also a molecular biologist, and it was hard for me to be like accepting of how it was perceived. So I just said, those two areas I know I want to play in. And then I started to look for things that fit into the mission. How do I support the industry with the skills I already have? And how do I re-educate people specifically within my community? Same as my family. Like, how do I bring them along? That allows this industry to continue to be more diverse. So my mission evolved over time, but really was from me assessing, and that's what that's what I got paid to do: assess an industry, assess white space, analyze it, create plans based on that assessment. And I did that with the cannabis space.
No, that's
Absolutely.
super dope. If you guys are listening, she's just really in tune to where her passion is, and was able to really fold into and create an opportunity for herself based on her passion. And that was going to be my next question. You have this passion for education. Where did it come from? And what were the gaps that you saw that got your brain ticking around the whole education premise and looking at it as something that you're good at, but also that you want to make money from, it could be a revenue generator for you?
Well, of course, I have to, definitely credit my mother. She was an educator. I mean, she went multiple masters. She was working on her doctorate in education. I feel like she actually finished it, to be honest. My mother was quite educated in that regard, but she also taught us a lot at home. And then our job as one of the older siblings was to teach the younger siblings. So Vita learned to read from me, and we taught Ice how to read. I mean, we taught her how to talk, read, all the stats. That's us. Right. But it became, that's just who we were. And then when my son finished 5th grade and my mom was still with us, we together decided to homeschool him. And that really built my passion for being able to, just to educate my own. I also felt that way around Isis because she was the youngest in the family and not necessarily trying to go a traditional path. And so there were ways that I was like, how do I transition what I learned in college and grad school for her as well? But then going to and doing things with M4MM, we met so many people that had such a distorted view of the industry. And it was like, how do we first, in order for them to be super advocates, in order for them to fight for the right thing, they've got to be re-educated on the history. They've got to be re-educated on the science. So I think it was just a narrative that made sense over time. But I also looked at the comps, right? Green Flower Media is one of the comps. At some point, I was using that tool a lot, and then I started to realize that it was out of the price point for people of color, mostly, especially for an industry you don't know about that much. You're not going to necessarily drop $2.99, $4.99, especially since it was online at the time and it wasn't necessarily in person. I think I just saw that there was a hole, and then I had a really bad experience, which I'm sure you know about, Roz. You remember the first client out of Arizona, and once I had had to defend my own identity, I took
Yeah.
my blog, The Weedhead, from, hey, I'm just chronicling, oh, we went to Art 420 and we saw these people speak, to now I really want to educate, because this is a mistake to think that you can play with how well I can convey that message. And that includes educating around the snakes in the industry, the pitfalls in the industry, the scammers, and some of the perspective that Black people don't belong in the industry. And so it was important for me to just say, it's not just about my story, but I don't want people to have the same journey either.
Yeah.
Let's skip all that and go straight to the cheat codes. And that's when I got to write it.
You know, the journey and cheat codes, everything you're saying right now makes me think about your book, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and all three of us get it all the time, even to this day, people want to get into the industry and they have a lot of questions, but sometimes they don't even know the right questions to ask to get them going in the right direction. And, you know, I even took your book and, you know, went through it and went through the exercises and so on, because you know, it's important that we as minorities, when we don't know something, like if we're stepping into a space that we're not fully aware of everything, that we find tools that help us navigate through our thinking, you know, that allows us to ask the right questions, so then we can go do the research. And I thought your book was, you know, did a really, really good job about that. Talk about some of the feedback you've gotten from the people who've used the book over, because it's been out now, what, how many years now? A couple of years now, 2 years, right?
Going into, started writing at the end of 2017.
And then, hey, E, but before she gets into the book, because I'm going to take you down a journey, right? So before she gets to the book, because this is going to blow you away. She came up with a concept that was an education concept. She went into a state that had no program and was the first education concept in a state, because I was there, and a Black woman. And if you could just walk everybody through that journey, and then we want to walk into that book journey, because I think there's some connectivity there. And how you were able to not only be creative and come up with the acronym and what it means, but also be in tune with the industry to say, you know what, here's a market that is an opportunity. And that's so, it's the convergence of creativity and opportunity that creates, you know, that's where the revenue and the success comes in my opinion. So walk us through that and then go into the book. That'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, actually, Roz, you're right. The book came out of that concept. So what Roz is talking about is in early 2017, we started really building the concept around this community-focused education. I had been to so many B2B events, but it was almost like, you know, sort of you want to educate people, but you also want to indicate how difficult it is. It was almost like those deterrent. And I just felt like the community base needed to be educated, especially right before votes were happening. And so we were in I guess a client-based relationship with people out in Oklahoma. And as much as they wanted to be in the cannabis space, they still didn't understand cannabis. And out of that birthed the idea of CEASE. And CEASE is an acronym that stands for Cannabis Education Advocacy Symposium and Expo. And it's really about community-facing focused education around the science of the plant, the plant being medicine first and foremost and always, and then the advocacy component. We expect people to just show up and know how to lobby? No. We expect people to know what to ask for? No. You know, and to do so in Oklahoma, we were the first to actually be in that state. Oklahoma had just started to look at medical cannabis. In June of 2018, it voted and it passed. And we were really instrumental in that. We got to work with the former Senator Connie Johnson, who is like the mother of the marijuana movement in Oklahoma. So again, Black folks being, in some ways, talking about it early, but being passed over as it's happening. It was quite an experience. We had several people who were like, when we showed up, because we have an all-Black team, they were like, wait, y'all are the people?
Y'all doing this?
Y'all did this?
Listen, you got, and the thing about it is she's doing this conference in this hotel. And I was there, and it was 95% white folks, and they were in there like, but this beautiful young African American woman powerhouse is putting this together, and just the depth of content and information and different stations. And I didn't even talk about the movie, you know, a screening that you did, and how dope that was. We got our own little tabletop of popcorn and candies. I mean, really a fantastic job, and that's what I want to. I want you to continue the story about seeds in Oklahoma. Because if you guys don't know, Oklahoma is the wild, wild west. It's over 2,000 dispensaries in Oklahoma.
Yes.
Like they get down. It's an open, free market. If you can afford the license, you get a license and you can go. And I know you're shaking your head because you've been out there as well.
I haven't
right?
been out there before.
Yeah.
Two states I talked about, Oregon and Oklahoma, since
I'm telling you.
2017.
And here you got and you touched it. So tell us how you felt during that whole time with this. I mean, you walked into that doing that expo, was the first one there. What'd you think, and what'd you walk away with? How'd you feel about it, and your take on everything after it was all said and done?
Well, I was really glad and feeling blessed that I had such a great cannabis network. So I called on you, I called on Gia, I called on Shara, I called on so many people that I had just gotten a chance to be on a panel with or talk with. I basically was able to reach out to anyone that I felt really understood how to educate folks, and they cared about the education piece, cared about people getting it. Leo, it was a little bit of a family reunion too. We got to hang out and also enjoy, and it made me feel protected because I knew I was going into an environment similar to Arizona where there aren't a lot of positive imagery of Black folk, which is why I also wanted to tap into the former Senator Connie Johnson. She was running for governor of the state at the time, and it was a really good synergy because she knew that conversation around medical cannabis was going to be instrumental. We got a lot of news stories and they were shocked. I mean, I had full on fro out and they were shocked, but they were still appreciative. I still get people that contact me now because Oklahoma is not only is it Wild Wild West and that there's so many dispensaries, but to be truthful, they have 9% of the state on the medical program, not 9% of the patients that could be. 9% of the whole state has said, I'm gonna get a medical card. That's unprecedented. If Florida had those numbers, we wouldn't. I mean, the amount of revenue that'd be
2.1 million people on.
And did they do anything from an education standpoint from the state? Since you've done your conference there, has the state itself done anything? To help kind of turn that tide there to where you have more than just people who are looking for cannabis. You have, people who are learning about how it could be impactful and using it. Did you?
No, I think that they followed a lot of the ideas that came to the table with testimony, and a lot of folks who attended testified. We gave them a lot of good information around that vote, and I feel like there were some cases where they were going down a path where it felt like they were going to be really strangling the industry, which you see in a lot of other medical states, Louisiana, and instead they were able to go the opposite, and now they're seeing it in their gross profit as a state. Like they basically are way surpassing expectations based on it being a medical cannabis state only. But the truth is, I think it's just about access. They didn't necessarily educate as much as I would have liked. A lot of other people came in and followed suit and started doing events there. But I think what they did best is they didn't limit the market. Like I talked about in Arizona, I only have 5 licenses they gave out initially. And in this case, anybody can have a license. Not to mention hemp grows out the concrete there, right? And so there's also the hemp component as well. And so teaching them that hemp and marijuana were both cannabis was also instrumental, I think, as they started to build out their plans. That was my thought.
Yeah. So then going back to E's question, because I think that's so critical, because I think you had to walk away with such a positive kind of experience and going through that process of setting that up and setting that education up. Where did the book idea or concept come into play? And then if you could then answer Eric's question in regards to where you've seen it really make a difference in people's lives and being able to give them a starting point.
Well, that whole year we did a lot of firsts, right? We were the first at the Black Enterprise Entrepreneurs Summit.
Yeah,
we
in Charlotte, right?
Yes, we were the first at NAACP National Convention, and so I was one of the first to talk at Essence Fest. Everywhere I went, that was Black folks primarily coming together. They asked me, "Do I have a book?" And I was like, it's in the works. So it was a demand thing. Somebody asking for it, you got to list. And so at first it was like, oh, you could do an easy little ebook. But I then went back to what we experienced in Oklahoma. We did contract out with an educational company, and that came with a book. We created different levels from the Can of Curious, the Can of Advocate, and the Can of Serious. And Can of Serious came with a book. But we had to contract out for that. And I was like, no, but we know so much stuff. How do we, turn this around? And in truth, I think it was just a matter of taking so many speaking engagements, writing for entrepreneur conversations that we've had, and putting it all in a book format. I really wanted people to learn, and it was important for it to be a workbook over time. It was a book that started off, and then over time became a workbook because, again, going back to being a homeschooling mom, you've got to come in, you got to actually do the work. If it's not putting any pen to paper, good luck on making it happen. I mean, I keep a lot up in my head, but I literally have 5 workbooks right here, not of my book, but just of composition books. Exactly. This is purple. I'm like, yes, mine's green. Yes, we in colors already, The point is that I'm always writing. And you saw me at the event that I came to for 420. I was writing there. Art 420, I was writing there. So I wanted to encourage people to not come in and think that you're going to be told what to do. You've got to create your own path. But it does start with re-educating and level setting. Okay, where exactly is the industry outside of just growing and buying and selling? Because that's all we know in the legacy market. So I wanted to really outline it so people can then take their own innovation and their own spin and crossover.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
say that again. Outside of the legacy market, which our communities are so used to, we're used to seeing growing, buying, selling.
That's it.
So and not realizing that you now have a full-blown industry that has to. So if the growing, buying, and selling is the middle of the spoke of the wheel, you basically have all this other stuff that has to be it has to be the spokes that go to the wheel, right?
Absolutely. And it's perfect that you say that, because hopefully then it can conjure up other places where we grow or develop and then we do buying and selling. That's hair product, right? That's clothes. There's all this, there's so many other comparables, and I worked in that environment. Consumer packaged goods, CPG, that's the environment that I feel like I really grew up in as a businesswoman. And so I saw that right away, that we're missing the rest of, not just we as in Black folk, but really the whole
a lot of people.
When we first started in this industry, they were missing all of the spokes right there, and people trying to do the job that they know they're not really capable of doing, reinventing themselves. And now that we've grown up, and I think the industry's starting to grow up, and we've got big cannabis, I think we're starting to realize how big that spectrum is. And I wanted people to, especially people of color, to really understand it. So it doesn't matter where you're working right now. I bet you, if you read this, you'll probably find a transition point that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, that homeschooling comes into play, because when you homeschool, you have to. It's not enough just to give a lesson. You got to break that lesson down. You got to, like Roz is doing right now, taking you through that journey, because I want you to get here, but before we can get here, it's some things you got to understand and discover first about yourself before you can get there. And so share some of the stories that you've gotten back from people who have reached out and had your book and used it.
It's been a real blessing, because I feel like it allows me to be validated in sort of the vision that I've always had for the cannabis space. It's been mostly positive. More often than not, I get people who say, I read your book and it made me do this, or it made me add this additional vertical to a business I already had. I read your book and I never even thought that I could do that in the cannabis space. Those are the type of messages that I'm constantly getting. I also think it gives people real hype on what that next step is for them. So it really incites the passion that I hope that they see that's coming from me for them as well. It gets them excited around it. And a passion, not just about being an entrepreneur, but actually re-educating other people too. I want people to be like, listen, so I heard the T, and the T is that this was illegal for wrong reasons, or that the government actually has a patent. Or did you know that Oklahoma and Oregon are probably the last place you want to see black folk, but that's where we got to go if we want to do cannabis right now. Like, I wanted people to share it like that, and I feel like that's what's happening. I'm getting a lot of also just great feedback, mostly from women of color. I'm gonna be real. I use purposely my colors of purple and greens and things like that, because it is a for us by us, and I want to encourage women of color who are by far like super women entrepreneurs right now. We're like that group, right? To say, hey, look at cannabis. We're doing all this great stuff in small business. We're fastest growing around all of those things. But how about looking at this industry? And that's actually rare, because again, the industry is mostly male dominated. And I think it was just, it's been empowering to kind of bring along that group. I wanted to attract more of my sorority sisters to be like, oh, wait, that's a soror. Okay, let me go ahead and pick this up real quick and see what I can do to transition. So it's been really, really positive. But I also really like the folks that have grown with me. So if you got the second edition and the third edition, which came with a whole extra chapter on hemp and all these additional details, more questions, and the forward by Roz, like the combination of all of those things, I've just seen people's growth. They saw my growth and they're like, listen, I'm right there with you, and here's where I am now. So it's been a really positive journey. There hasn't been any real backlash on it. I'm always, waiting for someone to be like, you said this, but that's not true. Because some of this stuff is first time it's being put in writing. But so far it's been like, yo, you said it and I didn't even think about it that way. And when I did more research, I found this. And I love to hear from STEM folks, folks who are in the science and technology and are like, yo, I didn't realize that when I'm thinking about cannabis or weed, that like straight up there is molecular biology happening here, and I'm like, yes, you can nerd out with me, please. So
so one thing about you've entered into, I want to piggyback on you mentioned briefly that you spoke at Essence Festival. You've spoken at, have had several speaking engagements, and I'm really speaking of the ones that are non-cannabis industry. Because Eric and I, we did Essence Festival, and we feel like, the tide is turning, and I want your feeling in regards to not mainstream, and specifically Black America looking at this and being inquisitive. How many questions and people did you get that they don't even know if they want to be in the industry? They're just inquisitive to understand, what does this plant mean from a medical and a health perspective? And I love your terminology, real science versus bro science. So speak on that a little bit.
That's my favorite part. I mean, I know we can make money and we do want to generate wealth. That is definitely a goal. But I always come from the standpoint of what lives would be different if cannabis was actually legal. Your mom's journey, my mother's journey, me trying to get it while I'm an executive at Target illegally, it just a mess when I think about it. And I understand that stress even asking, but I always love kind of illuminating the fact that you don't have to necessarily be utilizing marijuana to be getting the benefits of cannabinoid medicine, introducing hemp to folks. We got tons of questions on that. In fact, at the Black Enterprise Entrepreneur Summit, that was the majority of questions is like, do you sell product, right?
Right.
They wanted to know if we had product, and they feel like they're looking at me. I look like someone they would want to buy something from. In addition to asking if I have a book, there was a lot of, do you sell product? And I have this ailment. What do you know about CBD? Even when we were in North Carolina, they actually had a couple of CBD tents in the little space, because North Carolina is the Black hemp capital of the country. And so that was really awesome to see how many people were putting the dots together and recognizing that hemp is cannabis too, and that maybe the precursor to marijuana legalization is hemp. And so we had a lot of good conversation about that. But working so closely with the Minorities in Medical Marijuana. Now I'm on the board for Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. I spent a lot of time within the Black and Hispanic community trying to re-educate around the health, because we have a lot of ailments, from sickle cell to Crohn's disease, MS, lupus. These are all things that actually there's a lot more prevalence in our groups, in our communities. And cannabis is, in my opinion, and again, my uneducated, non-medical doctor opinion, is the best medicine. This is coming from a patient perspective.
Right.
Yeah. And at the very least, we need research on those particular things where we have higher prevalence. We need to understand and see if cannabis can be, impactful with that.
Yep. And at the very least, why not try hemp and hemp-based CBD, because it is legal, and at least will give you an opportunity to understand some of the nuances, not all. I don't choose hemp as a way to demonize marijuana. We're all in the same family, and it's all part of the same genus, and the plant itself needs to be freed so that everyone can, capitalize on the health benefits. It's medicine, whether it's an adult use capacity or not. It's always medicine. And I'm always excited to share that.
That's what people say, let me get medicated. And with the highs of the industry and growing and creating seeds, the family is growing, the book, there's been lows. And I know there's a situation that happened where there was a targeting, there was a, and hopefully it's okay to share a little bit about that. And I want you to talk about how you could go into in areas, you can go and try and do the right thing, and still, as Black people, we still getting arrested and going to jail for this plant. And I'd love for you to share that story, or give a snippet of how what we do as an industry, we still have this social justice issue that face people of color that is prevalent still to this day.
Yeah, so when I'm not talking about cannabis as medicine, Roz, as you know, I'm fighting a good fight with M4MM and other organizations that are about recognizing how cannabis has been used for decades as a tool to maintain systemic racism. And so, I've been able to work all over the country. I got the opportunity to work in Wisconsin, which after federal legalization of hemp, basically also legalized CBD. And I got to go into a Native American community and work there and re-educate law enforcement. Not but a month after re-educating the same law enforcement, I was in town with our all-Black team and, staying on site at a hotel. Granted, I just got there, but we were meeting in a McDonald's, and out of nowhere, 4 police officers came in, and we were getting questioned about what our room numbers were. And, there was a marijuana smell in the hallway, and, they've tracked it to us. How, I'm not entirely sure. And specifically, they tracked it to the room that I had just checked into. Now, granted, I just got off a plane, drove an hour and a half, like all the things that you do that you usually don't involve smoking cannabis, real tough, right? Sure, but also we followed the letter of the law. We were there for education and not for a consumption event in any way, shape, or form. And so I got harassed, in my opinion. I got my civil liberties denied. I kept asking a lot of questions. I actually got to record a lot of the audio. My team was there. And really to protect them, I asked them to say nothing. And I told them that it was, it's my room they're asking about. I was the person driving the car. And so they brought me outside. I was detained for 90 minutes in the back of a car with the canine, and who was barking profusely. And it smelled, of course, like dog. And all because why? Because they thought they smelled marijuana in the hallway. And the police officer was actually there doing a meth bust in another room. And so I'm like, well, okay, you smell marijuana in the hallway, you busting through a meth room. How about checking out the meth folks before you come for the only Black folks? Right. But they found nothing. They actually held us for the whole day in terms of I would not agree for them to go through my room. They wanted to go through the room, and so they had to get a warrant to do so. They tossed the room, confiscated my business cards as proof that I was a drug dealer. They confiscated black soap. Yes, African black soap. They kept calling it dab. I was like, please, I hope you dab that. Please dab the soap. It was a mess. I was very
that'd be the last dab you ever take.
Okay.
But but it's so critical that this is a woman who's an accomplished woman, accomplished in her industry, just has been moving the needle in regards to creating opportunities for herself. And just you guys know that when we fight this fight and advocate, and advocacy is so key to us as a people to make sure this industry is supportive of everyone and that we're not targeted, that she too ended up getting targeted in for no reason. And so I'm assuming, Dasheeda, when you are looking at where you are right now in your new role and even future going forward, wherever you do for the rest of your career, that social justice component, that'll always be an important component to you, correct?
110%. I grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, which was like the murder capital of the country, mostly due to the war on drugs. It was a lot of shooting, cops shooting, sometimes not even knowing who's the bad guy for real. Because I know these are the homeboys around the way. I know them. I actually don't know these white police officers that are coming, slamming folks to the ground, frisking whenever they felt like it. A lot of it due to the same exact experience that I had. I had never been in handcuffs before that time. And I realized that it all brought back a lot of post-traumatic stress that I felt from being a young girl watching my young 14 and 15-year-old male friends, buddies. We'd be playing basketball and they'd come and get harassed. So we were over policed. And I'm constantly thinking about that as one of the few Black women in the industry that's in a cannabis regulator role. I think about that term regulator even, and I'm constantly saying we've got to, again, it's a mindset shift. It's not about enforcement because, the truth of the matter is that idea of enforcement comes from a negative stigma that everybody dealing in cannabis is bad. And so therefore they're just going to do bad stuff and we got to make sure that don't happen. I think regulation is about facilitation. We get our driver's license. That's a regulatory part of government and people try to facilitate it. They create, little infographics on how the steps to get your driver's license. That should be the licensing process as far as cannabis is concerned. All this extra stuff comes from the fear-based laws and regulatory frameworks that get put into place. And so I'm adamant about how do I use my time in the city of Portland to show that it can be done differently and be more successful than what we've seen.
Dasheeda, talk about how, now that you're in this role as a regulator, you're no longer an advocate per se. And by definition, if you will, I mean, the advocate spirit is always there. But talk about, whether, I don't know if you find it challenging or not, but walking that fine line of, you're there to establish and run a program for the city, that is safe for the residents, that makes the city money, or, whatever the case may be. But talk about how that fine line of your role, or even if it's, a source of empowerment for you in your role, but just talk about how you kind of navigate the two.
I like to think of myself as an advocate on the inside. As a city official, technically, I cannot advocate for or against any official laws or politicians. And luckily, they don't got to worry about that because what I'm trying to do probably ain't in the law right now yet. And it probably needs to be fixed. And there's very little politicians that I'm going to hang my hat on these days. I've been doing hashtag follow the leader and blacking out on social media because I feel like the time is now for people like ourselves to step up as leaders beyond the cannabis space, but to say, hey, this was used for 40 to 80 years as a tool to maintain systemic racism. A lot of the things that our mainstream Black leaders are talking about, fighting about, guess what? This was what they were using to actually get us to this point. And we can use it to start to dismantle some of it. So I wrote the vision more recently for the City of Portland's cannabis program, rewrote it, and it's evolved because it went from, we want sensible regulation and we want equitable practices to, no, we want to regulate and we want licensing and compliance to be well done, but we want to do that to deliver specifically against the reparative and restorative opportunities that we can get out of cannabis legalization. There's been no regulatory body stood up like that. Most of them are placed under the taxation offices. They tell us by where they put them what they want them to do, right? They want the program to make it money. And I guess that's okay. I want our program to make the city money as well, and it has been. But I think we can make money the right way, and we can make money with purpose. It can be very conscious.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing.
How'd you know you were ready for this opportunity? I mean, not even how'd you find out about it, but how'd you know, like, was it like, did it just feel right, or in regards to, going after this, and or was it just like, I'm gonna just try and see what happens, and kind of like, I know I can do it, or kind of walk us through how that what you were going through during that time period?
Well, to do that, I have to tell you a little bit, just the backstory, which is with MJM Strategy, the management and consulting arm of our businesses, we had a lot of clients, and we went from small to really big clients. I mean, huge multi-state operators with P&Ls that looked crazy. And by crazy, I mean terrible. And I was just like, I don't understand why the private sector is struggling. Over time, once the East Coast started lighting up some of the work we were doing with M4MM, public sector opportunities started to really arise. And I started finding myself working more and more with lawmakers, law enforcers, and regulators. And I found that they were, and some of them I hold in the highest esteem, but others I was like, yo, you don't really care, one, how this is impacted in the history, or you're really ignorant to how the history of cannabis prohibition has impacted communities. And I don't think anybody that's running these programs or creating laws for cannabis legalization should be that ignorant to it. And so a lot of our initial contracts was just about educating these folks. Over time, I realized that I could do that job. These are business units. The cannabis program has a P&L. It is a business unit, no different than the ones that I ran for Target and Victoria's Secret. However, it has a higher calling in that it has an opportunity as a public program to really impact communities at large. I kept trying to get the private sector to do it. And I've done things where I'm building cannabis campuses, and we're working private-public partnerships. And I realized it would make more sense and less frustration on my part when the white boys decide they want to go left after it doesn't legalize, that I can be more impactful from inside. So it was a chess move. I just didn't think it was going to happen as soon as it did. I think for a while I started looking at New York as my opportunity. Portland came because I was part of a subcommittee on the Oregon Cannabis Commission. And shout out to Dr. Rachel Knox. I confided in her that I saw through my research that Portland was looking, and she was like, you probably should apply. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll throw my hat in. And once I really started to dig in, I recognized that this was what I in business would call is a very great pilot location, test case location. All the things I'll be writing about, doing one-off projects, I could actually get
now you execute. Yes. And shout out to Dr. Knox being a sister girl, like, girl, go on, do that, because that's what we need in our lives. We need a sister girl to be like, you can do that, you can go for that. Because I didn't know about it. And so you guys who don't know, Dasheeda used to be our chief strategic officer, and used to be because of transparency and wanting to make sure that she was free of having any type of, we don't want there's no impropriety, there's nothing. She stepped down from that role once she knew that she secured the role with her position with the city of Portland. We're so super proud of you in that role. I think you're going to blow it out of the water, and just happy that you had, that added girl, someone behind you saying, hey, go for it. I think it's going to be the breadth and depth of your career, being able to actually go in on the inside and try to create change and do it. And not only just from our position as Blacks in cannabis, but for the program in totality, for patients, for veterans, you're serving everyone. So everybody, so talk about that, the balance of knowing that you are, of course, there's a core group that have been disproportionately impacted, but also knowing that you have to serve everyone that's in your constituent base there in Portland.
Well, that's the good news of all this. When we do the right thing for all of the communities, it actually benefits the full industry. And I've been saying that for a while. This has been something that I've seen proven in so many other areas that I worked in the natural hair space, in the plus size market. When you take into account people who are, I would say, the least highlighted, but your most influential in spending, you wind up shifting things quite significantly. I think people thought they were going to legalize, and they were like, Black folks just going to come because it's legal. Why? Why? We have no incentive. I think even the patients, they thought, oh, they'll come because it's legal. Why? If I've been working for years with someone, why would I go through all of this hoopla to try to, just get mediocre cannabis from the legal market at that? So, I wanted to make sure that I was looking at it always from what's going to build the business. And that's what's good for everyone. How do you expand the pie? And that meant building a framework for Portland that didn't, it existed in a what I call informal way, but now we formalized it. On one side, we have our core competency. Every regulatory office does licensing, compliance, and has some sort of policy influence or oversight. And that is the core of every regulatory business, but or regulatory office. But I also saw, as we pour into a cannabis community and we build that community, the business community, the consumers come, the cannabis economy grows, and the economy is what drives cannabis tax revenue. And Portland is one of the first jurisdictions to vote in favor of using cannabis tax revenue directly to impact those communities that have been adversely impacted from cannabis prohibition. So I get to build something on that side as well.
Right. Did they do the amount of money they want to focus and push towards impacted communities? Is it a set amount, or do they do a percentage of sales, or how do they do that? Because we're looking at that as a model for a couple of other different states, and I would love to know how they do it in Oregon.
I would say in Portland, because Oregon is still also trying to figure it out. And I'm thankful that I'm participating as a leader there. But they voted in 2016 to add a 3% excise tax. That would be on adult use retail sales only. That goes into its own cannabis tax revenue fund. And they outlined 3 different areas, of course, always to pass laws. Sometimes I feel like we start with public safety. And that was one of the areas of re-education, public safety, making sure the cannabis industry is not bad. And I don't mean to mock, but that's often what we are thinking when we put that in. The other was to influence positively growth around small businesses, minority and women-owned businesses. And then the third was to directly impact the communities that were really targeted, if you ask me, during the time that it was prohibited. For the last few years, we've been able to give in that third bucket a total of about 1.5 million in grants to the Portland community. Unfortunately, we also know from just some of the history that about 80% went to public safety. So here again, that same, historical context where our communities are going last to the table for the pot of money, and police and public safety get to go first. Thankfully, the city council, in the wake of all the George Floyd things that have happened in civil unrest, the city council voted to divest the money that has been going to the police bureau. And our fund has been increased to $1 million annually ongoing. And I'm hoping to get all of the money, to be real. But basically, while they increased the fund, I decided it needed to have a real name. And I'm good with acronyms. So I decided to create, on the left side of things, to support the core business, which is licensing, compliance, and policy. We have our social equity and educational development initiatives, or SEED initiatives. And I'm excited because under SEED initiatives, we have our SEED grant fund. This year, we will have multiple grants to give out, a multi-year grant as well as a single year one-time grant. And I'm excited about that aspect of building brand around it, so that people, even if you don't use the dispenser, you're not going into dispensary, you're not even a user or a consumer, you still can support the cannabis industry. You can say, hey, I support SEED initiatives. I support the SEED grant fund. I support the reinvestment back into communities that were devastated. So the goal is for us to be the single source monitoring, measuring, and reporting unit for cannabis tax revenue in the city. If it comes into the revenue fund, we need to know about it, and we want to make sure that we're getting that return on investment back into the communities that need it the most.
Is there any other policy like that out? Is there any other policy? I'm sorry, Ethan, you follow up after this. Any other policy like that out that you model after that, or that you kind of came up with your concept of how to basically accountability is what you're doing regarding that tax revenue that's coming in?
No, not fully yet. I will shout out Illinois because obviously they have allocated a certain percentage. I believe it's 25%,
Yeah.
and of the tax revenue. So they actually call out a percentage. Whereas this tax revenue comes in, and the city council was basically giving percentages more aligned to what has happened with the general fund. There wasn't any like, oh, we want to allocate specifically this amount back to the. And so I say if they're going to give us the freedom to just have it as a full fund, that's great because that means as a program, and you know me, I'm a businesswoman, so I'm like, as a program, I'm, you know, a couple of $1 million is not hard for us to manage as a fund. That's something that we as a program responsible to the public to report on and say, this is how that cannabis tax revenue that you voted on has been used. And prior to that, I don't think it's been taken as seriously. I don't think there's anything really in law yet. A lot of people want equity oversight committees or groups, but no one yet has put it into practice. And so this is me trying to, again, pilot something that we've been talking about for a while.
Yes. I know. I'm about to call you. I got to get the on it, man. I love it. Go ahead.
My question is, you know, we couldn't be more excited about you being in this role, and you know, as an organization, we're going to do whatever we can to, you know, support you and make sure that, you know, your office and your group that you are overseeing has the authority and the control that it needs to be impactful, right? But you know, everything we're doing as an organization, everything you're doing is all about community. Mm-hmm. How do you need or how do you suggest that the community, those who are in Portland who will be directly impacted by it, and even those outside of Portland, how can they be supportive of you and you know, ensuring that, again, that you have the tools that you need to be impactful?
That's a great question, Eric. And I've been saying this since I started, and I revealed that because I was on the job for a few months before the reveal. The community needs to just come out and show out, right? Like there's a part of me that don't mince words just because it's a sister in the role. Tell us exactly how you feel, because I can't fix anything or even address it if I don't know the feedback. And I think sometimes people, especially on the West Coast, they can be a little bit more laid back. On the East Coast, they tell you right quick, get you together real quick. And that has not necessarily been the case. So it's been really positive, and that's awesome. And I like live there, but it's okay to give critical feedback as well. And, you know, the program has been in place for 5 years. So I feel like we full grown up out of college, graduated kind of cannabis program, more mature. It's really important for us to have mature goals and a mature vision. We just did our first open house, virtual open house, and it was well attended. I want people to sign up for our newsletter, pay attention to the email blasts that go out, come out, especially for these virtual events. You don't have to leave your house. So come out for the virtual events to learn more. And yes, I will definitely, once we release our 2021 Seed Grant Fund application, y'all know I'm dropping it. Yes, right. Where you guys said, you know,
and we have a Oklahoma. I mean, not Oklahoma. We have a Portland chapter president there. Some work that she's wanting to do and things that we're wanting to do. So I mean, listen, we can go on and on ad nauseum. But before E closes out for today, this has been so awesome, and it just makes my heart so warm. But just give people, Dasheeda. Everybody may look at you and go, man, everything just kind of is working for you. Tell them, like, what do you do in regards to having a work-life balance, or just give a word of advice in regards to those people that are still struggling to try to figure it out. I think it's so imperative for people to hear that you don't always have to be perfect in your walk to get to your goals in your career.
Yes, I mean, you know that meme where they say like people think it's like this, but it's really like, you know, that's so facts, like, right? I am not at all perfect, and in some ways I thank God I work with my sisters because they let me know very quickly. Hey girl, boo, no, especially Boss Baby Ice. Well, she will get you all the way together very quickly, but it has been a journey. I spend a lot of time in meditation. I wake up at the wee hours of the morning, so 4:00 a.m. I do like that quiet time to be able to get my thoughts together. My mother is the one who encouraged me and taught me first about meditation. And I've been using it ever since she passed to kind of really center myself. I definitely think it's important to have the people that you can confide in when it's really tough. And I mean, if we wanted to go offline and do a tell-all, Roz could do a tell-all because she got those calls in the middle of the night when I literally thought I was going to have to go all the way Brooklyn on folks, because this is an industry that has
bring it back.
It'll pull it out you.
And I remember some of those early ones. And I mean, that you understand the growth and maturation I've seen in this young lady, because I do remember a couple of the early days, and having some real candid conversation. But I saw the greatness in you. I saw it. I saw the potential. I saw you were so much better than some of the little stuff that was going on. And the funny thing about it is, the little stuff that was going on, they so far behind you. You have surpassed them. It's just, so I just,
so that's what makes it even funnier. But half the time, right? I will also say, I don't even call it work-life balance. I call it work-life integration. I am still running a number of other businesses. So the great thing about my contracts is, like, I'm working in Portland and I'm doing a lot of great work in Oregon. But I had a few clients there, but I don't have my business base there. Our family businesses continue. And that means we're super busy and there's always a lot of ripping and running, but taking that time to have a moment, whether it's with my son, who I cannot believe is almost 17, or whether it's with my sisters and we just get a little sister time, sister FaceTime. Those are the things that uplift me and keep me going. But occasionally it can just be really sad. I wish my mother was here every day. And I think part of my meditation is more thanking God that I still have a connection to her and my grandmother, who have gone and passed on to the next life, but I feel very protected by them. And I think that they sent me people like yourselves to just be in my corner, in my community. And I lean on it when I need it. We have those real talks when I need it. And then, you get yourself back together, grace under pressure, and you go out there on stage. I also have to say, last bit, shout out to my sorors of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We are about to show up and show out.
I see y'all. We see y'all.
I can't even. I'm so excited.
If you know what, I never pledged when I was in college, but if I ever want to be an AKA, it's now, because I know y'all about to show up and show out, and I know you're super proud of Senator Harris and just what she represents, and the wonderful strong women of AKA, and you are again a prime example of the strength of your sorority, and I know you're super proud.
I am, but I'm also proud of the Divine Nine in general. We're going to show up with so much love.
The words out of my mouth.
Because the truth is, I mean, she went through the typical route. She was a Kappa sweetheart first, and then she, AKA, like, there's love all around. We're proud of us. And I had to say it because that's also been the community that supported me quite honestly. They know me the best. And I went back to my source, like, I can't believe this is going on. They're like, we want you. Yeah. So
this is a time like no other that I'm seeing Greek life, and next year will be 20 years I've been in the frat. I'm seeing activity and movement in Greek life at older level than I have ever seen in our past. I mean, shout out to Chevron Jones, A5A. He's an alpha, just won his Senate race. Old schoolmate of mine is an SG Rose. She just became a circuit judge here in Florida. I mean, when I look around, I'm like, okay, I see where we at now. But we showing up, and it's a pleasure. And again, shout out to you and all of your beautiful sorors. You guys are, this is your moment right now, and well deserved and everything. And I'm excited that you were here today. This was awesome having you come back. Thank you for just coming and sharing with us, checking in with the family, and just being here. And I think the last little bit you guys left off about that work-life balance or integration, as Dasheeda says, it's so key. And it's again, it ebbs and flows, and we have to have people there who can help hold us accountable. And so I always end off Can I Talk with Roz with take this weekend, love on yourself. You have to love on yourself. It's like they say on the airplane. You got to put your mask on first, all right? So love on yourself, get some rest this weekend, love on your family. And again, when we wake up, we got to hit the ground running next week and We'll see you guys again for another episode of Can I Talk with Roz.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dasheeda.
Thank you. Bye. See you later.